Welcome to the Jackson Rudolph podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Rudolph, and this is episode 43, brought to you by the one and only, the world's leading magazine of martial arts, Black Belt Magazine. And today is a very interesting episode because here in Oklahoma City, where I'm at a Century headquarters, working from home today because there is an ice storm going on outside. So the power's been on and off. Things have been crazy. But hey, in the martial arts, we learn about perseverance. So we're going to make this episode happen. Even if it gets cut a little bit short, we'll be sure to finish things up next week. But hopefully we get through the entire show today because we have a very exciting guest, Mr. Alex Reyes from Point Fighter Live on Facebook, as well as the show, from Team Dojo Elite, from Pro Point. This guy's got so many important roles and does so many great things for the sport karate and the martial arts community in general. And that's why I'm so excited to talk to him. And that's why you should be so excited to listen to him. So Alex, I'll just kind of let you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us how this whole thing got started. How did you get into martial arts in the first place?
Hey, first of all, thanks for having me on, and you're doing such a great job. And thank you, for doing this for our sport on a great platform like Black Belt Magazine. So it's just awesome. I'm a big fan, so thanks. But yeah, basically my martial arts journey, started with my father. My dad is a first generation Ed Parker Kempo black belt. So basically I've been doing this since I was 4 years old. Our whole family has basically, been doing it. And he's out of school since 1973 open. So, that's basically, I got started, into martial arts. Yeah. And then, and then that's it, but it's funny. I didn't really like it as much, until I became like a teenager. And then I started seeing like my dad, my brother traveling on Metro, being on a big team. And before all that, my dad had his own teams that he was sponsored by too. But then that's kind of what like really got me into like the martial arts 100%, but the whole time I'm glad that my parents kept me in there, because I was kind of like, oh yeah, I liked it. But then when I saw the sports side of it, is like when I said, this is what I want to do. And then, I got into teaching and everything after that,
Mm-hmm. Very cool. So certainly grew up in a martial arts family. For those of our audience that are tuning in that don't know about this Reyes family, your brother Manny Reyes Jr. was on Metro All-Stars, one of the greatest sport karate teams ever assembled. And then your father, like you mentioned, a first generation student of Ed Parker. There's a whole lot of Ed Parker disciples and descendants that are fans of Black Belt Magazine that tune into our stream. So I think that's really cool for anybody that's been through the Ed Parker system to hear, is that we've got the son of a first generation student here. Obviously your father, Manny Reyes Sr. And I've known your dad for a long time because he's also the promoter of the Pan American Internationals. He dedicates and volunteers a ton of his time to be a judge at a lot of the world-rated NASCA events, which is something that as a competitor, everybody really appreciates, is how much judges sacrifice to show up and be at the events and to sit through and watch all those forms and judge everybody. So talk to us a little bit about that, just growing up in that martial arts family and specifically having someone as significant as Kempo legend Manny Reyes as your dad.
Yeah, I remember as a kid seeing, Ed Parker coming to the school, and it was like, my dad would bring him like 2 or 3 times a year, just to train with him directly. And then he would do seminars. And then my dad would also go with him to like different countries as like a dummy, like he does the Kempo techniques on and stuff. So, but my dad really just like, he's a Ed Parker disciple, like you said. And like, he's followed kind of in his footsteps because Ed Parker had the karate tournament, the Long Beach Internationals, right? He was part of the Budweiser team back then too, which was huge in karate. And then, my dad, he kind of followed in those footsteps as being big in Kempo, but also big in sport karate, which Ed Parker, he was respected by everyone pretty much. That guy was known. He was like, he made, I know Bruce Lee did a demonstration in his tournament and everything. So, but he was into the sport and he had like a great vision for the sport. He was a fan of it. And that's one of the cool things of my father I like with Kempo. Kempo guys, sometimes they just stick to the techniques and, some of them are just competitors. There's fighters that just do a little bit of Kempo, but he's done it all, kind of like Ed Parker. So, so just growing up with that was super cool, and it's cool to see my dad now. He has his own organization, the World Kempo Federation. He has seminars. He has now with technology now, Zoom. He has a Zoom black belt class every week, and he has all his black belts from around the world in it. So it's been, you know, it's been pretty cool to see that, you know?
Yeah, that's really cool. And you know, it's funny how you talk about, you know, him traveling with Ed Parker and being kind of the demonstration dummy, because I've been on the other side of that and seeing your dad as the seminar instructor. I remember we went to Guatemala. It was myself, your dad, and Ross Levine. I was teaching Bo, Ross was teaching point fighting, and your dad was teaching Kempo, because Kempo is huge down there in Guatemala. Like his seminar was the biggest seminar by far, bigger than Ross and I's, right? And I watched him do the seminar, and when he would demonstrate, he would literally hit his demonstration dummy like 8 times before you could blink, and the dude would be on the ground. And that's one of the things that's so impressive about Kempo, and that's why I like some of the recent rule changes in sport karate, so that in the adult division, Kempo has their own event, because even though those forms aren't made for demonstration, there's so much to be learned, and there's so much to respect by watching those routines and the speed and the fluidity. Guys, I believe Larry Gonzalez, that's so good from Team DKS, I believe. Even Sammy Smith came out, and she's doing Kempo forms now.
She has it.
Yeah, but anyway, so now we're going to move on to some of your endeavors. And obviously the biggest one that anybody tuning in here on Facebook is going to know about is Point Fighter Live, both the show, the Facebook page, all the posts that you guys put out there, the voice that you give sport karate athletes, and just the platform that you give the sport for everybody to be able to come in and watch point fights from tournaments, whether it be old school or tournaments that are happening right now, and to showcase some forms and weapons competitors and things of that nature through the platform that you've created, which, as I think you've told me before, like over 1 million followers, which is crazy. Take us back to the beginning of that. Where did the idea come from, and then how did it develop?
It's a great story, I think, you know, because you know, me and my friend, one of my teammates, Steve Hart, we would always talk about sport karate and matchups and just like, oh, this and this, just every day we'll just talk. And then one day I was like, man, imagine if we did this like on a podcast, like a radio or something, with us and with other people. And he was like, man, yeah, that sounds good. Let's do it. So we just started off with like a show on Blog Talk Radio, right? Which is just, you have to listen in through your phone, I think, right? Or no, you can click a link, but you do the show through the phone. Right. And, you know, our first show, we had, you know, like 3 listens, you know? And then that was our first show. We go back and we're like, oh man, 3 listens. The next show, 10, you know, and just little by little, I guess through, you know, consistency, like just doing it every week and just like keep pushing, it just started growing. You know, we were getting 200, 500, then some sponsors started coming in to advertise. Tournament promoters started contacting me, you know, to promote their event on the show. You know, then came the Facebook page right after that. And, you know, I started, you know, just covering events, you know, and just doing it on, then I went on and started doing it live, right? Live streaming on the page. And then that's really when it just started taking off, you know, and just the whole thing with Point Fighter has been, you know, love, basically, you know, giving love just like you're doing right now. That's why, you know, you guys are growing so much too. That's the key to everything. All I've done really is show love to a bunch of people, and then it grew because every time I interview someone, they would share it, you know, it would build a following because their followers would come and follow mine. So basically, you know, that's what I did. And I think sport karate needs more of that. They need more shows like yours, you know. Sport Martial Arts is doing a great job. Travis Plowden. We need more. And, you know, what we're doing is like, you know, something that's great because we're not just talking about ourselves. A lot of times with sport karate people, you know, or even myself, you know, you just focus on your team and yourself. Like, and then, so we all really need to come together to make it grow even more and share. You know, you're a fan of somebody, share something about them, you know, right. And that's just a way for it to grow even more, I think, you know. But yeah, so then, you know, we're at almost 1.3 million followers now. I got the shows, the page has grown. You know, I got new shows added to it. Isabella Caracas doing Sport Karate Live. We have Mike Palmero, legends of Sport Karate, Mike Palmero and Jason Tanks-Borelli. They got their own show now. I'm going to start up probably another show.
They do like fantasy point fighting matchups, right?
Yeah, fantasy.
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah, they do fantasy point fighting matches, but they want to get into other stuffs, and I'm fine with that as well because I love hearing them. Those guys have been fighting and winning in sport karate since like I can remember, right? So they fought in so many generations and eras, you know, and Jason Borelli fought in the WCL as well with kickboxing. So their knowledge is great. So yeah, and I'm looking to start. I just keep adding shows to it, you know, growing our YouTube page and you know stuff like that. So it's just it's been great. You know, it's been great. It's not what I expected when I started this. I started this just with passion and loving it, and as a fan, and it's blown up to this. But usually that's how it goes, right? Usually good success stories are not, you know, if you're just looking at it to make money, you know, and then it's just a job. But if you're looking at it as your passion, that's when it kind of builds and grow up and builds up to be something big. But I'm just blessed, you know, I'm just blessed. But it all comes down to love and being positive. That's what I would say to everybody. You know, people hold themselves down so much by putting themselves down and like saying they can't do it. Because I'm not the best speaker, and I wasn't the best speaker back then even. I got it better, you know. So you have fear. You're like, oh, I'm not good enough. But you just push and push and be consistent. And, you know, you get better at it. That's it, right? Until you get to where you want to be, you can't give up, which is great for martial artists. That's what martial artists teach. All martial arts, jiu-jitsu, even mixed martial arts, everything, karate, taekwondo, goju. We teach never to give up and keep going, right? Because we're going to get better at it. So, yeah, man. So that's basically the story with that.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think that's an excellent take-home message that hits on so many of the tenets of martial arts. And the big thing, and you and I have talked about this before, projects built out of passion are almost always successful, right? Yes. And it was kind of the same thing with my show, where it was like I started my podcast as, you know, people don't realize this, but before I was on Black Belt Magazine, there were 20 episodes that happened, right? And that was literally just me talking to, you know, maybe by the time I had done 18, 19 episodes, I had, you know, 100 or so people tuning in. But that was, you know, kind of what I always expected because, you know, it's my students and the people that care about what I have to say, right? And so I never expected it to be anything bigger than that. I was just doing it because I love talking about sport karate and I wanted to have an outlet for it. And then all of a sudden, I got an opportunity with Black Belt Magazine, and now here we are with this platform to be able to share sport karate with so many other martial artists. And that's the thing that I want to share with anybody, you know, that's watching this. If you've got, you know, a project that you've been thinking about that you haven't done yet because you're hesitating, you don't know if it's going to work out, you don't know if the timing's right. The biggest thing, and I think, Alex, you can agree with this, is just make the jump, man. Make that jump and then just trust it. And if you're passionate about it, it will be successful. And so now kind of in retrospect, Alex, looking back on that journey, now that there's so many features of Point Fighter Live that exist, what would you say your number one favorite thing to do concerning Point Fighter Live is, just out of curiosity?
My favorite thing with Point Fighter Live is still going to tournaments and covering it and just being around my people. That's it. You know, that's my favorite thing. It's just the friendships you build through martial arts events. You know, it doesn't matter what style you do or what kind of events you do. It's like, it's just beautiful. You know, I have great friends from so many places that I still talk to today. They're not even competing, and we just talk on a weekly basis. And that's really my favorite thing about tournaments and, you know, Point Fighter Live, basically, you know. And also number two is giving back. You know, I'm able to, like, I have shows with people now, and I'm highlighting other people to do it. So I'm, you know, it's giving me a platform to like help others, right? So that's one thing that I do want to do is get me in a position to help other people. So now that I'm doing that, you know, it's just that feels really good. You know, I never thought that the feeling of giving like that would feel so good. It's like the best feeling in the world, I think. It's almost like I'm addicted to it, you know?
That's awesome. Hey, that's a good thing to be addicted to, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is you mentioned that sense of community, that the sport karate industry, if you will, the sense of community that we've developed in the sport karate world is incredible. And it's because we know that in the grand scheme of martial arts, we're a small pond. And so if we ever want to grow into that big pond, that lake, that ocean, we've got to make sure that we're sticking together and we're all trying to lift each other up. And speaking of community, you have another community that you're involved in. So you, along with Josh Horwedge, and then God rest his soul, the great Gerald Dawson, formed Team Dojo Elite. And very quickly assembled a great deep point fighting roster. We've seen Ryan George out there competing and winning on whether it's virtual events and things of that nature. And he was always electric to watch competing in the tournaments. Of course, Cameron Dawson, the superstar heavyweight, one of the top 2 heavyweights in the world, in my opinion. Then he's been a superstar, and you guys have had him since day one. So just talk about kind of how Team Dojo Elite Power came together, and how were you able to create such a strong, deep, and I know I just mentioned 2 people, but I mean, there's so many others that are great members of the team, and go ahead, feel free to highlight them and throw those names out there for everybody. But just kind of tell us the origin story of TDE Power.
Well, you know, before that, it kind of started with my relationship with Josh Horwich, which I picked him up in 2013 on WKF. And from the beginning, he was like, hey, man, in the future, I have a vision of like opening all these schools, and I want to have a national team as well, the dojo, right? And I was like, bro, that's a great idea. I haven't really seen anybody do something like that. So it's great. So he fought for me for many years. Then 2000, I believe, 17, he started his own team, Team Dojo, right? And I had Cam, Devin, and Zach were the main guys on the team there. And they were doing great. They had a great year. My team was Ryan George, Zain Pedraza, Jeremy Francoeur, and Pablo, right? So Pablo Moreno, 4. We had 4. I always had a small team. So then, we were both having pretty good years. And, but me and Josh just continued our relationship. Like I was telling you, our friendship, and we would just talk weekly. And I was like, man, it feels like we're still on the same team. And then, Pan American comes. That was the final event. And we were eating at Burger Fight together, and, right on the beach. Right. And I was like, hey, imagine Dojo Elite Power. That would be awesome. And then I said it almost like a joke. And I was like, man, because we were coming close to winning, both of us. Right. And I was like, man, if we put it together, we could win. But it was more like a joke. And then Thanksgiving, we call each other, thank each other for our friendship. And Josh is like, hey, are you serious about that? I'm like, of course, I'll do it today. Let's go. And then, that's it. It just happened fast. It happened in Thanksgiving. And then the first tournament was AKA, right? So it was like less than 2 months, a month and a week later, or 2 months later, right? So, and that's it. And then, Gerald Dawson, man, rest in peace. God bless him. He was, he always gave me great advice before, like when I could think about things that he told me before. The coach, he was the coach of TD Power when we first started. And, and then I started talking to him daily, and I really was getting to know him. And then like 2 weeks later, pretty much after the team combined, he passed away, and we just decided to dedicate, the season to him. And and we started off with a bang. In Chicago, we won, almost everything, right? And, we made sure, and we left the chair empty for Gerald on that tournament as well. I don't know if you guys can remember that. And then the rest of the season was great, and then just to finish off the story, it just got better and better. Then the Taco Bell sponsorship came. We were being sponsored by Josh, the dojo, and then myself and ASG, right? We combined together, and then all of a sudden Taco Bell came, and we got a huge deal for like multiple years, and then we weren't expecting that either. So that kind of just came on towards the end of the season. It's like, wow, so it's just great. It was great. That's just basically the story there of how it all turned out.
That's awesome. And I love any time that we can get more corporate brand names in the sport. I mean, for a long time, throughout a lot of the 2000s and the early 2010s, Team Paul Mitchell was the only non-martial arts brand that was represented, right? And so now we're getting Taco Bell involved. I mean, you go back in the day, you've already mentioned there was Budweiser, and there was Trans World Oil, and there was even a Team Pepsi for a little bit, right? Yeah. So there's all these big brands that were out there. And if we can get back to that once again, with sport karate, that's kind of a big step in the right direction to be able to make us a more legit professional sport.
Yeah.
Now I do want to, go ahead.
Yeah, I think that shows like these and the, just more media on the sport is what's getting us there. And just like you said, the sports coming together, even if you're like in one league and you support one league, you still kind of support somebody else, and people are being less selfish, you know, with that and less bias. So I think that that's one of the reasons why it's going to continue to grow. But go ahead.
Yeah, I was just saying, I want to touch on, highlighting the players a little bit, then a couple of players in particular. I know that you mentioned Zane was on your WKF power team before Team Dojo Elite formed. He's a lightweight that always has a chance to go through and win that overall grand. We just saw Pablo Moreno win the overall grand at Compete Nationals, which was the last NASCAR World Tour event that happened. I think that was his first overall too, so that's really exciting. First NASCAR overall, at least, maybe.
Yeah.
So that's really exciting. But then, you talk about Cam, and you talk about Chicago right after Gerald had passed. And to me, that is one of my favorite sport karate memories, period, is Cam going into that Warrior Cup round, wearing his dad's old uniform, chair empty, and everybody in the room knew Cam was winning that fight no matter what happened. Cam was not going to allow himself to lose. The
energy was high,
right? Yeah. And I want to dive a little bit deeper on Cam here, because I was teammates with Cam back when Cam was on Paul Mitchell. And one thing that gives me kind of a weirdly unique perspective about Paul Mitchell is that by the time I want to say I was 17 years old, I was the longest tenured member on the team, the longest tenured active member on the team. Because Paul Mitchell has, over a 25-year history. We've had lots of great competitors. By no means have I had the longest tenure, but I was the longest tenured active member. And it was because we were going through a major transition. We had a lot of our fighters had recently retired or moved on. And a lot of our forms competitors, your Matt Immigs and your Kalmanchokas and your Caitlin Deschelles had just retired and moved on. And so I was the kid at 14 when they were all still on the team. And so over the 3 years that I was kind of growing on the team and moving towards the adult division, all of a sudden I became a leader of the team as somebody who'd been on the team longer than anybody. I got on about 6 months before we added Zoltan Laszlo. And so that was kind of the way that pattern worked. And so when Cam was on Paul Mitchell with me, I had been around the team for a little while, and Cam was maybe 18 or 19 years old, I think. But the thing that was so impressive was Cam's leadership. From the moment that Cam joined the team, he didn't have to get tenure. He didn't need to be around for a while. From the moment that he came into that team meeting, he was a leader, right? He set an example for everybody else. He was a leader of our fighting team. He was somebody that everybody looked to, in a tight situation or whatever. Cam was the guy. He was who you talked to. He was who you expected to get a few points ahead in the team fight or come back from a little bit of a deficit, which, by the way, that was an incredible team back when we had Cam and Zoltan, everybody at the same time.
Yeah.
I won't get caught up in that. So I just want to talk about specifically Cam's leadership, because that's the thing that people don't see. People see that he's an incredible fighter. People see him winning almost every time he steps in the ring. People don't see the leader and the role model that he is off the mat. So maybe speak to that a little bit, and what type of a leadership role does he have on Team Dojo Elite Power?
Yeah. Cam is a great leader. But real quick, before I get into that, Paul Mitchell and Metro, those two karate teams was what made me who I am today. So I've always been a huge fan of Paul Mitchell, and it's great. It's a great dynasty, right? Cam. So Cam is if you talk to him, it feels like you're talking to an older, wise guy. I'm like older. I feels like he's older than me when he speaks. Like it just makes sense, And then so he's just ahead of his time, which is a testament to his father. He taught him so well. It's incredible. Sometimes he has his dojo now that's doing really good as well. Now, even during this pandemic, and he's just he's still young, and he's just he's got it. He looks like he's got everything in control, and that's just the way he is. Also, as a leader with the team, we have a team chat, and he'll hold everybody accountable. He'll tell you, he'll give you that tough love. Hey, you need to do this. You shouldn't do this, that. He'll tell you to step up your game. So, and when he, if he does something, that he could have done better, he's like, hey, my bad. He holds himself accountable as well. So that's what leaders are all about, right? And then and just he shares his we all share our workouts as well, and he's usually the one that starts it off, and it just motivates and pumps everybody up as well. So it's he's a great leader, man, and I'm really proud and honored to be on the team with him.
That's awesome. Absolutely. And one more, I just want to share a little story that's kind of a testament to Cam's character. You mentioned
Yeah.
him being in the group chat, and that's what kind of reminded me of his time with Paul Mitchell. And this is something because, people retire, people move on, people go to different teams, whatever. That's part of our sport, right?
Yeah.
And Cam ultimately was going to Team Dojo because he wanted to fight for his dad. He wanted to be alongside his dad. Lo and behold, that was one of the best decisions Cam ever made because no one knew how little time he had left with his dad, right?
Yeah.
But when Cam had decided to leave Paul Mitchell, he called every single member of that team. From me, who was longest tenured, all the way to Jake Presley, who was our young, like little fireball that we had. He called every single member of the team and told him that he loved us, told him that he enjoyed his time on the team, and that, he was going to be going in a different direction. But it was absolutely the best way that anybody could have possibly handled it. And from that moment, that was really when Cam's character came to fruition for me. I realized, how much gravity that had, how much impact that had on our team. And it made everything okay. You know what I mean? Like nobody was upset. We lost one of the best fighters in the world and nobody was upset because we knew why he was doing it, and he handled it like a professional. He did it the right way.
Professional, man. Exactly. Absolutely. Professional fighters, professional teams, that's just how you handle things. That's why the sport, I think, is growing, because there's more professionalism in our sport. And, this thing's going mainstream, I think, one day for sure.
Absolutely. And we're going to work together. We're going to make that happen, man. So now we're going to have a little bit of fun with this one. So we talked about Team Dojo and kind of how it came to be and how many great athletes you guys have. So now we're going to play fantasy just a little bit, right? If you had all of sport karate history laid out in front of you, every fighter in their prime, right? So you get prime Pedro, you get prime Raymond, you get prime Tony Young, prime Nasty Anderson, whoever, right? If you had to assemble a 5-man team, 3 starters, 2 alternates, who would you assemble for the all-time point fighting team?
For the all-time point fighting team, wow. All-time. So, all right, so how many players? 3 and 4 3 fighters and 1 alternate?
3 fighters, 2 alternates. I figured that makes it a little bit easier.
All right, well, you have to go with Raymond Daniels. You would have to go with the best guys, and also guys that, are great fighters as well, but they also excelled in team fighting, right? Because it's going to be a team fight there, because there's some great fighters that won everything in overalls, but in team fighting, they just didn't excel. I'm not going to mention those names, but I'm just going to say, for me, it'll be Pedro for sure, right? Raymond Daniels. Those to me are like the 2 all-time greats right there. And then, I'm going to go ahead as the third. I kind of want to go with somebody that's in the modern times now. I'm an old school guy too, but I would say, because I'm right now, off the top of my head, I'm just thinking old school guys, I was about to say the third name, and I'm like, hold on, wait, he's old school. Okay, I got it. He's kind of semi still into it, and he's kind of in the past. I would put probably, Ross Levine. Ross Levine would be that third. Ross, Pedro, and Raymond Daniels, and then the alternates will be, I got to go with Ronald Brady. That guy he won everything. He won everything, and he was a clutch guy. He was part of the best 3-man fighting team, one of the best. Like, I think they went years where they didn't lose, the Bradys and Mafia, right? And then I got one more, right?
One more.
I would finish it off with Cam, just based on how he's become, and he's not even in his prime yet. I think he could just get better and better. But you need that. He's that tough heavyweight that can move like a lightweight,
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, that would be, I guess. But man, I could probably get another team to rival that team. That's probably like everyone's choices right there. But you could probably get like a Trevor, a Mafia, a Tankson, and that's a great team right there, right?
Oh yeah, that's crazy. That's what we should do. We should assemble 2 of those teams and then see what would happen if they did the matchups, right? And you mentioned one name that I wanted to touch on here, because I feel like he doesn't get enough respect for his ranking all time, and that's Ross Levine. Like when you hear people debate, like, who are the top 5 point fighters of all time, right? You hear Ray, you hear Pedro, you hear Nasty Anderson, who absolutely deserves it. You hear Kevin Thompson, who absolutely deserves it. Rest in peace to both those gentlemen, right?
Yeah.
You hear a lot of names that absolutely deserve it. But somebody who deserves it that I feel like I don't hear often enough in those conversations is Ross Levine. Because in my book, as somebody who I kind of started competing in 2006, which would have been as Ross was kind of coming into his prime, I guess. And so for me, I mean, Ross was always somebody who was either winning the overall grand, in contention for the overall grand, turning a team fight around to try to win the team fight for CJB or Full Circle or whatever team he was representing at the time. Of course, Impacts later in his career. And for me, what was so impressive about Ross is, you know, we look at some of these other fighters. Everybody knows Ray because of his sidekick, jump spin back kick, and the tornado kicks and all the things that he tried to throw. Ross, I would, if you looked at the statistics, Ross has probably scored 80% of his points that he's ever scored on the reverse punch and on the defensive sidekick, right? And when you're that much of a master of those essential point fighting techniques, how can you not give that person that respect, right? It's like in the very first episode of this podcast, I believe that my comparison for Ross Levine to an NBA player was LeBron James, because it's like all of the things that are essential to the game of basketball, passing, rebounding, scoring, whatever, LeBron is very good at all those things. All of the things that are essential to the game of point fighting, Ross Levine is an expert at. Fight IQ of Ross Levine is equivalent to the basketball IQ of LeBron James, right? I could talk about that for 3 hours, so we won't go too deep into that. But I just wanted to take that moment and give Ross his respect. Anything to comment on that?
Yeah, you know, Ross, he's so intelligent too. You know, like he's almost like a coach at the same time. You know, while he's fighting, and he just could dissect the fighter, and that's one of the reasons why I picked him on. And you know, he won, like you said. I think his first tournament was AK 2005, and he won fighting and weapons grand in his debut, you know. And before that, he was
all-time Warrior Cup wins leader, by the way.
Is he? Yeah, he's an all-time. So he basically won from 05 till, you know, recently. So he won for a long time, probably like 10 years longevity. So that's great. And before that, he was an awesome junior. He actually was on WKF for a little bit. We also had a junior squad that was undefeated for a few years, and he was part of it towards the end. And so I just got to be with him firsthand and train with him as well back then. And his parents are great people too. His support system is awesome. But yeah, props to Ross. And you know, I guess when you fight with that reverse punch, and he has basically like 2 super techniques, although he could kick you in the head too. But the D side and the reverse punch, right? The blitzing, right? And just people like the 3 people I said, basically, you know, Pedro, Raymond, they're flashy, right? Guys. So I guess that's why sometimes people remembering, and guys like Ross, I think everybody respects him, but and he's so humble. He has a lot of fans as well. But yeah, like when you said people talk about the best, it's just, I guess maybe it's they master those basic moves, like kind of like my brother, he won for like all these years with just a reverse punch. Everybody knew it was coming, and he still did it. He won NBL and NASCA the same year. He was one of the first guys to cross over to full contact, and he did it with just basically a reverse punch. So I guess sometimes people like that get overshadowed, but it's okay. But at the end of the day, the fighters and the people, they put them in there. They got their respect, of course, you know?
Absolutely. And you bring up Ross's Weapons Warrior Cup. I mentioned Ross is the all-time Warrior Cup wins leader. I believe he has 9. Ross, if you're watching this, go down in the comments and correct me. I believe he's got 9 cups. But yeah, one of them was with weapons. And Ross has been extremely influential in the development of a lot of different bow staff tricks, and people don't even realize this. When Ross was a junior, I remember seeing videos of him putting the bow in his mouth and doing a backflip while he's got the bow in his mouth, doing a gainer, backflip off of one leg, as well as him working with Nate Andrade and creating so many of the body rolls, you know, shoulder to neck rolls and just rolling the bow around the body. Ross was an innovator of that. And then on the point fighting side, in addition to all of the wins that he's gotten, you know, when we were talking about, you know, who would be your all-time point fighting team, the first person comes to mind is like, okay, well, you got to have Ray. what people don't realize is I've seen Ross beat Ray 8-2. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like at New England Open, I've seen Ross handle Ray. You know what I mean? So, and that's no disrespect to Ray. I mean, everybody loses, right? But if you can be somebody that can beat Ray multiple times, like Ross has, then that should tell you where you rank all time. You know what I mean? It means you must be pretty good. So we're talking a lot right now of kind of the recent past generation. Ross has since moved on into full contact kickboxing. Raymond's fighting MMA for Bellator. And so on the point karate circuit, on the point fighting circuits right now, we're seeing this kind of new wave of talent. Obviously, Bailey Murphy. We've talked a lot about Cam. Avery Plowden's one of the top heavyweights right up there with Cam. We've seen Elijah Everill just win the Irish Open, or well, not just win, but before quarantine won the Irish Open, right? So we see all of these young fighters kind of coming up and making a name for themselves. So in your opinion, what do you think the future of point fighting is? In order for, we had these great fighters in the previous generation, but we weren't able to get the TV time and we weren't able to get the sponsors and the brand awareness that we want. What is it that this current generation of superstars can do? And what are the things, not even just that the superstars can do, but us as the sport karate industry, what needs to be done for us to take those steps to being a bona fide professional sport?
Yeah, I think that we're taking those steps right now. And also, I want to mention some of the women fighters that are coming up too, the young ones, Katana, Chubidi. There's some great, Elizabeth Rouliard, like she's just like 18. So there's a crop of women as well too. I want to give props to them as well. But yeah, so, for the sport, I think it's going towards the right direction. Like it's more organized. Events are being live streamed. The more professional judges, your father does a great job with ProMac, right? And running that, and just like, they're kind of like have the blueprint right now, certain leagues like USA Sport Karate, NASCA, ProMac. I think that they have the blueprint where like, the rules, certified judges, because a biggest problems in point fighting is sometimes the judging, right? That's what people complain about the most. So they're just you see more certification for judging. They're more professional. They all have to have polos, pants, and, it makes you more professional. And that's when you come to work like that, and sometimes I'm even hearing like the US Open pays their judges as well, so things like that. I think that's what we need more of. And social media, and that's where the sponsors will come in. We obviously need more sponsors and just more professionalism. That's it. I think that's what it comes down to. Juventex has done a great job with the screens and the scores and stuff like that. I think that that's what we need, man. We need now to get to the next level. There's some things that, we could do, like maybe the production of it, the way it's put out there, and like kind of what we're doing with Pro Point in a way now. I think that could help the sport as well,
Absolutely. And we're going to go ahead and shift and talk about Pro Point here in just 1 second. But real quick, I do want to highlight, you mentioned kind of this crop of up and coming competitors. I mentioned some of the current superstars right now, but we also down in the junior divisions have a lot of great competitors that are coming up. Team Paul Mitchell's got Alex Mancias. Top 10 USA has Jason Latona. His brother Enrique is already an adult and doing great things. Those guys are incredible. Tyson Ray from Next Level. So we have some very exciting young rivalries that are brewing that are going to be exciting and give us some fireworks when they get to the adult division. But speaking of fireworks, let's go ahead and transition over to Pro Point. You guys had your first event just a couple of weeks ago. Really exciting lightweight bracket. You had an 8-man bracket as the wild card to determine who would fight Robbie Lavoie, an all-time great lightweight point fighter, right? Ultimately, Robbie wound up beating the winner of that wild card bracket. Robbie went on to fight Bailey, which was a highly anticipated fight, right? You're getting a superstar who's still fighting of the previous generation, and you're getting the current superstar Bailey Murphy against one another. When it was all said and done, it wound up being Bailey with the win. And if you guys are interested in seeing how all of those fights played out, you can head on over to blackbeltmag.com after this podcast episode is over, and you can look up Pro Point. You can get analysis for both nights, both the wild card night and the night of the main event. You can get the results and analysis of both of those. So I guess, Alex, for our audience that hasn't heard of Pro Point yet, just kind of introduce it. What is Pro Point? What makes it special?
Well, Pro Point is something that me and Josh kind of were talking about, or he was actually talking about doing last year, like around summertime. And, it was kind of, the idea was kind of born there. And then, the pandemic happened. And then we kind of saw Jesse Ray starting to plan his virtual thing. And he was like, man, this Pro Point idea you had could actually be done now. Because before that, we were just kind of like, all right, in the future, it's kind of in the back burner now. But then kind of Jesse started his virtual fight tour, which he's doing a great job with. And then we're like, hey, we could do something like that, but it's different, like how we had it, where it's a tournament. That's basically, it just started rolling. And the concept behind it is to have great production, right? Point fighting, clear points as well. And just in a way that more people could want to watch it. And also treat the fighters great. They got contracts, guaranteed money. They got money from the pay-per-views, and then plus the prize money. They got picked up in a limo. So basically, highlight the sport. Basically, that's what we're doing with Pro Point, is highlight the fighters and just putting it in a even better platform. And it did cost a lot of money. We spent a lot of money on it. But the same way we're coming, with Point Fighter, the mentality with Point Fighter. It's just like our baby. We're gonna Pro Point is like we're passionate about, and we don't mind putting in money and stuff like to build it at first, and hopes to get more sponsors and stuff. So that's kind of like the vision that we had for them. We're gonna have another one in December as well, and overall it was great. There's some things that we could adjust, which we are adjusting. But one of the great things about Josh is he's gone onto these shows after, and he said, hey, we're open to feedback. Let us know what you think is what we should fix, right? And I think that's been awesome, because we're making those little adjustments, and it's going to be even better next time. But I really think that Pro Point, with the structure, the way it is, where it's really super clean points, right? That's the only way you score. Is like it could probably get into like the other organizations, like not just our sport karate orgs, right? It could go into like maybe WKF fighters, traditional fighters, because they fight really good with the reverse punch. It's kind of like, they remind me almost of like the 80s style fighting. It's kind of like the 80s came, then sport karate kind of evolved to our style point fighting, and they kept going to what they were doing, kept that going. But I think that maybe it could bring those worlds all together into something people could understand, and the sky's the limit, man. So yeah.
Absolutely. And I know that with you and Josh and that sky's the limit mentality, I know that it'll grow and achieve great things. I also do want to give a shout out. You mentioned Jesse Ray and Virtual Fight Tour. And one thing that I want all of our viewers to understand is that these are different products, right? Pro Point's got the bracket style, and you're seeing more like a point fighting tournament take place. Jesse Ray is doing with Virtual Fight Tour primarily set matches. And I encourage everybody, support both of these promotions. It's not about one or the other. They're not.
No, yeah.
These are separate promotions that are doing separate, incredible things for the sport. And if you love sport karate, if you love point fighting, absolutely support both of them. So now I want to go ahead and shift to some of the specific rules of Pro Point.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So a couple that I remember just from tuning in and watching it and covering it. You've got the circular ring, which I like a lot. That kind of I feel like that's better for point fighter movement. I'll let you speak to that a little bit. I believe there's a little bit of ground fighting that's allowed to take place, maybe one or two strikes. I want you to clarify that. And then most importantly, the scoring, how the fighters in the audience don't know what the score is. The judges are just writing their scores down, and you find out at the end. So go ahead, maybe elaborate on those kind of highlights, and then anything else that you think is cool or unique.
Yeah.
Kind of talk about how Pro Point works. How is it scored? What are the rules?
Yeah, the ring, as far as the ring, the idea of the halo came about, and we're like, we thought that people could maybe move around better instead of going into a corner, because point fighters move very well. They could just flow with that movement, We probably are going to make the ring a little bigger, but, the feedback from the fighters is that they said that they liked it. They was like, no, it's cool like that, but we still want to make it a little bigger, especially for when we get the heavier fighters in there, so they have more space to move. But the whole halo concept we love, and and that's great. As far as the ground fighting, a fight you could sweep and take and follow up with the punch. The fighter from the bottom, if on the floor, cannot score, right? He can't score basically. So So you have like a few seconds to score, like sweet follow-up punch, kind of like the old school way of doing things, you know. And basically, as far as the scoring, the referees in the middle stopping the fight, and then we have the judges on the outside scoring the points. Now, it's basically like the same as any other point fight. They're scoring, right? But the judges are not submitting their score till the end, right? So we don't know who wins until the end. And, you know, there was a few, some people are like, oh, we want to see the scores. And we're kind of looking into that, into doing that maybe like after each round. And then that's one of the improvements we want to make. I think that if you know who's up after the first round, right, you could kind of be like, okay, he's up, let's go. You know, and the fighter and the coach could kind of be up there too. But, you know, the reasons why we did it that way is because of this. And it's funny because all the fighters at first were like, oh, wait, hold on. How is this going to work again? But then when we kind of explain why, then they're like, oh, man, it sounds good. So basically, if you stop after a clash, right, and then you say, stop, judges call, a lot of times in our sport, that's one of the things that's sometimes unprofessional, right, where you see a coach or somebody argue about a point or like, oh, what is that, right? So we kind of wanted to eliminate that in a way. You know, and also just we wanted to have more of a flow, you know, more of a flow. So that those are really some of the main reasons behind it. And also, like, if you watch a boxing fight or kickboxing or whatever, they give the scores basically at the end, you know, but we do want to improve it with the score, with a visual. At least we show this, you know, the score on the screen, you know, in between in the first round, and then at the end of the round, show the full score and actually what all the judges called, you know, because basically that's what really matters. I think you could, if you see, because as a fan, of course, I would want to see all the scores as well. And that's something that I'm trying to push for. You know, unfortunately, we haven't gotten it all yet, but we're working on that. I actually want to post all the scores and what every referee scored, because that's what sport karate competitors are used to, accountability, you know, which referee scored what point. So we need to be better on that, you know, but we do have the technology to do this stuff. It's just the manpower. On the next one, we're going to have to hire a few more people for the production that could just input that stuff quick, and that's their job, you know, but that's not easy if we have one person doing like 3 or 4 things, but that is something we're going to improve on, and showing the score. I think that's the only thing that we need to make it even better, you know, but at the end of the day, it's all point fighting, you know, and the person that scored the most points is the one that won. And they were throwing hard, clean techniques. I mean, some of these guys surprised me. I hate to say it, but it improved. I mean, I was impressed, you know, because I was like, oh man, this guy doesn't hit hard because our style. But then these guys were all stepped up their game and were like scoring clear points, bam, like they were hitting. So it was like, I was like, man, I got even much more respect for them. And I'm a point fighter, and I'm like, man, oh, my bad. Okay, and I'm a point fighter, and I'm like, you know, these guys could do kickboxing, anything. Like those guys that fought in our pro point, if they get into MMA or kickboxing, they just have to, you know, get the training. But you could see that they stepped up for sure.
For sure, yeah, and I even heard you and Ernest Miller were commentating on the Pro Point event, and you guys mentioned several times you could hear when these fighters were hitting each other, which is something that you don't normally get when you're in a tournament room and it's loud, and you're in a ballroom and there's music and everything else. But you could hear these clashes, which is really exciting. I want to ask one more question about the rules in terms of the scoring, but before I do that, one thing for some of our black belt audience that might not be as familiar with point fighting. Because when you go and look at the scores, you might see that, you know, Judge 1 scored 4-4, Judge 2 scored 3-1, Judge 3 scored 2-3 in the other direction. And I want to clarify for anybody that might be wondering, like if somebody that doesn't know point fighting sees those scores, they're going to be like, well, this is all over the place. They're just calling whatever they want, right? But that is not the case. In point fighting, you are only supposed to call the point if you see the point. So you may be almost certain that somebody's sidekick landed, but if you're the judge sitting in the corner where you're seeing the person who got scored on, you're seeing their back. If you're seeing their back, you cannot guarantee that a kick landed on the stomach, right? And so that judge cannot score that point. Even though they're 90% sure it happened, you have to see it. You have to be 100% sure that it landed
Yes.
in order to give that call. So it's not because the judges are all over the place. It's because you can only call what you see. That's why we have the 3 judges in 3 different positions so that they can see everything. And on average, if you're in a circle and you have a triangle of judges, on average, 2 of those 3 judges will see all of the points that land appropriately. You might miss one here or there, but that's the nature of the game. You know what I mean? So that's one thing that I wanted to clarify. Now, the question that I have is, because these are 2 techniques that are a big point of contention amongst a lot of point fighters and a lot of debates.
Yeah.
So I want to know how Pro Point scores it. The first one is the kick to the body. A lot of fighters prefer it to be 1 point. NASCAR rules and other circuits have it 2 points. Pro-Mac has it 1 point. Waco has it 1 point, I believe. So what are you guys scoring on the body kicks? And for Waco, at least, they also score the back fist to the body. A lot of fighters, a lot of coaches have mixed feelings about the back fist to the body. So how does Pro Point score those 2 techniques?
Yeah, kicks to the body are 1 point. And then as far as the back fist to the body, it's not a point with us because it's just my opinion, but and I know in our rules, if you go to the NASCAR rules, NBL rules, maybe even WACO rules, a point is a technique that has control, power, and speed. I think something like that. I think the terminology with that is something like that, So and I think even in the NASCAR one, it says something like that. It has enough force to almost cause damage, but with control, something like that, right? But like and a back fist to me a back fist, you can hit me with a back fist hard, except Cam. I think I'll let anybody except Cam back fist me in the stomach in a horse stance, and I'll be like, go ahead, but if you throw a jab to someone's stomach, I think for me it's different. I don't know, but that's just my opinion, but it's also the opinion of the organization. Back fist to the body, it could be a strong jab. And then as far as for the future, 2 kicks to the head, right now kicks to the head are 2 points, but we're thinking about giving more point value to head kicks just to see more of it, because there wasn't many head kicks in our last show, and we kind of want that to showcase the flash and the speed and the good kicks from point fighting. So maybe we'll add some value to it, but that's all in the works right now. What do you think about that? You think that would be good to maybe a 3-point head kick maybe? What do you think?
I think 3-point head kick may be a bit much of a swing. You know what I mean? Because then, a 3-point swing is a huge swing. Like I almost feel like maybe jumping head kick, spinning head kick, something like that would be more worthy of the 3 points. But as far as the 1-point body kicks and the back fist to the body not scoring, obviously there's people that disagree with that. But the majority of fighters, that is the opinion that I've heard. I've talked to Ross Levine about it. I've talked to Cam about it. I've talked to Jack Felton about it. I've talked to a bunch of different top fighters about it. And the consensus seems to be they prefer the 1-point body kicks and they prefer the back fist to the body not being a scoring technique. And by the way, if you are somebody that's watching that has no idea what we're talking about with this back fist versus a jab to the body, one fight where it became particularly important, I forget the year, but if you go on YouTube and you search up Raymond Daniels, Justin Ortiz, I believe it was the open weight final during the daytime. And it was a very, very close fight. Raymond wound up winning in overtime, I believe, by 2 because you had to win by 2. But ultimately, that fight came down to Reyes scored on a front hand technique to the body. And the point of contention was it a back fist? Was it a jab? Ultimately, Ray did get that point. That's what allowed him to force overtime and ultimately get the win. And it's a big swing in that fight because if you don't call that front hand to the body, then Justin Ortiz is going to be winning that fight, not having to go to overtime, right? So that is the best case that I can think of if anybody wants to kind of get educated and just see what we're talking about when we talk about that front hand to the body. YouTube search Justin Ortiz versus Raymond Daniels, Battle of Atlanta. It's going to be the first video. It's like an 8-minute video. Yeah, I believe you were there. I think I was standing pretty close to you when we were watching that fight. That was
Ryan George had just fought Raymond, and that fight, the fighting there that weekend, I'll remember forever. That was some great fights there in that weekend. But absolutely. Man, as far as the back fist, I'm not a total hate. I'm not. I like back fist. You know, when I was fighting, I do mainly back fists. You know, even defensive back fists going forward. That was like my main technique. But like, I guess back fist to the body, I will be okay with it if it's going forward and it's strong. But the back fists that I don't like are the ones that are almost like D sides. Like, let's say you're blitzing and or you're kicking and they kind of just like do like a defensive back fist almost. And it's just like, or like a jumping fadeaway back fist. It's kind of cool though. You know, I don't know if it was a little harder. Yeah, like I've seen some people jump back. Somebody's blitzing, they jump up, they fade away and back. It's kind of like a fadeaway 3-pointer, you know, like it looks cool, you know, but I would like to see it more pop on it, I guess, for me to score it, you know, because it's not a super strong technique, but if you do it a little harder, then I think that's impressive, you know, a fadeaway back fist.
Well, it's also an interesting tool because, like, when you watch Cam, we've talked about Cam a lot, but he deserves it. If you watch Cam fight, one thing that I noticed that Cam does sometimes is he'll roll that front wrist and he'll fake, even in leagues where he knows he's not going to score back fist to the body, he'll fake the back fist to the body just to ridge hand over the top and get that front hand ridge hand score all the time off of the back fist to the body fake. So Cam, I'm sorry if I might have given away one of your secrets.
I love,
but it's really impressive. Yeah.
Hey, but you know what? Sometimes Cam, even with the back fist, if you see, sometimes it's not even a back fist. It almost looks like a chop. You know, it almost looks like a sideways back fist, like he's hitting like with this part. You know, so I think there's a picture of him like hitting maybe Yoskar in the face, and you can kind of see the hand almost like that. You know, I think that's why he loves wearing those the foam dip gear that he wears. You know, that's because he can have his hand like that to throw the ridge hands and those back fists. Right? Imagine if he wore like the new point fighter style, people won't see the ridge hand. It'll be like it'll be a hook, right? So, but I love ridge hands too, man. I would love to see, now that you're saying that, maybe, you know, adding some points for a cool ridge hand or something in there, you know. A ridge hand could be the technique of the night. And that's one thing that we did do, techniques of the night. And we had for the first one, the Raymond Daniels kick, which Bailey was the only one that I think attempted and scored it on Robbie, the switch kick. So that was cool to see. But we're really excited about Pro Point. You know, Ernest Miller is also a partner in it, Tim League. There's 4 of us, and you know, this thing could get, it's getting pitched maybe to some networks now, and that's our hope, to get it mainstream out there. You know, that's really what we want to see with the sport going forward. But, you know, me and Josh were like, man, you know, for point fighting to take it to the next level too, like some of the production needs to be off the chain, and like, you know, the fighters need to be professionally paid and guaranteed contracts. I think that's what, if you put something out there, then people will push it. You know, just like sport karate with us, with fighters and sponsor teams. A lot of fighters, I'm pretty sure a lot of competitors come up to you and say, how do I get sponsored, right? And my answer is, don't think about the sponsorship, right? Think about just winning. And when you win, everybody wants you, right? You get to pick. So the same mentality with this, if we do everything good, you know, and right, and we show it, and all it takes is the right people to see it, and then everybody's gonna want it, you know.
I couldn't agree more.
That's the mentality.
I couldn't agree more. And by the way, if Josh, Tim, Ernest, if any of you guys are watching, I'm going to go ahead and put in my vote for what it's worth for the heavyweight card that you guys have coming up for the heavyweight bracket. Or I think it's middleweight, because I know you guys are adjusting some of the weight classes. But for those bigger guys that are going to be fighting, let's make ridge hand technique of the night. I remember one of my favorite team fights that I ever watched. It wasn't even a close team fight. It was Paul Mitchell versus Germany at US Open. And we were already blowing them out. Sorry, Germany. But we were already blowing them out. I think Justin Ortiz fought first, gave us a huge lead. And I think maybe Tomas extended it. And then we went to Laszlo as the last fighter. And then, I remember they had to get kicks because they were down by like 15. And so the guy just had his leg up, and Laszlo just waits. Leg comes down, and Laszlo just unloads a ridge hand right on the guy's ribs. Broke the guy's ribs. He had to go to the hospital, which is unfortunate.
Whoa.
But wow. It was insane. So ridge hand is one of my favorite techniques. So, I'm going to go ahead and for what it's worth. Make that the technique of the night.
Yeah, man. Look, you could throw the ridge hand to the body. You could throw it to the head, and the front hand, you could kind of like, my father used to do that. He'll just jump back and kind of like ridge hand you to the face. And that's a cool technique. I think it resonates like karate, you know? You're
Yeah, for
seeing that
sure.
and you're like, oh, that's a karate. You aren't going to see that in any other type of fighting, right? A ridge hand. I don't think you can see that. Is that even legal in MMA, or I don't even know?
I don't even know. Yeah.
It'll be cool though,
You
right?
never see it either way. Exactly. And I remember it's a cool technique. Like I remember my very first Taekwondo instructor, when he taught us the ridge hand when I was like a blue belt or whatever, right? He was like, now if you land this, like, don't use this in self-defense. If you land this on somebody's temple, you're going to kill him. Right. And I was like, you know, like 10-year-old me was like, oh my God, that's crazy. But anyway, so yeah, ridge hand's one of my favorite techniques.
Yeah.
So talking about Pro Point, let's go ahead and shift on to the future. You've already talked about some of the exciting things that you guys are going to play with and continue to improve. Just for fun, any fantasy matchups that you'd love to see? Maybe a little bit of a tease as to who we might see.
Yeah, we are looking also into. That's great that you said that. And we've talked about this a little bit before. Like we want to add women in there too. You know, some way, maybe with a set match in our next card. You know, just to show women some love as well. You know, we're gonna have a women's card one day too as well in the future. You know, probably down the line, probably a few events down. You know, so we want to showcase everybody with this. And then what else? Yeah. Oh yeah, and set matches, right? With imagine a legend set match. I was thinking like, imagine if we have some people, some fighters that we grew up loving watching, and this could get maybe some of the old school guys to tune in, right? Imagine seeing like Pedro fight Tony Young again, or maybe one of or Donald Brady, like Metro versus Paul Mitchell. Those guys are still in very great shape. You know, if you look at their pictures and they look like they're still trained, they're all ripped. So I would pay to see them fight again, you know, just one more time.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's that. I mean, there's others too. I mean, your brother would probably do it, right? I'm sure Marty Eubanks might do it. I mean, there's a ton of great fighters that are still in shape and would love to fight. We can get those guys back in there. That'd be awesome.
Imagine also, not, you know, obviously not now, but probably in a few years, Raymond Daniels, right, when he's done with, because obviously he's fighting with Bellator right now, and he's got the whole contract and stuff, and you know, but when he's done with that, imagine him fighting like Jody again. Imagine Jody versus Raymond one more time, you know. And those guys are in their mid-40s. I think Jody's already in his mid-40s, and Raymond is like 41, right, or 40, around there. Yeah. Like Tom Brady's. These guys are like the Tom Brady's. Like they could still go in and win, right? But imagine them one more time, like. That would be a cool one for me in a few years to do if you know, we still got this going.
Another one on that same timeline, I'm going to go ahead and push my ballot in. Ross Levine, Trevor Nash would be awesome.
What? Yes, Ross Levine. And how about Chelsea and Morgan again? They had some great battles. Imagine if we could get Chelsea to come back out, right? I think that'll be awesome. That'll be awesome. And then, that'll be super cool. Yeah.
Couldn't agree more. So we could fantasize about all these great point fighting matchups all day long. So we won't do that too long. I don't tell people this often, but because I'm a forms and weapons guy, my favorite thing to watch when I go to a karate tournament is the point fighting, right? Like there's nothing I like more than watching team fighting. Like that is, like, to me, one of the most exciting things. And maybe it's because I'm a forms and weapons guy, and so I like watching other things because I'm always in the forms and weapons ring. Who knows? But I encourage everybody to watch forms and weapons too, because that's what I do.
No, for sure. No, but we want to add that to in Pro Point. I forgot to mention that some in between matches, like add some kind of, because we are karate, we're all sport karate, we're one world really, and just like highlight someone that tricks, highlight somebody maybe that you would come in and do the bow, you know, some spectacular, cool, just bam, add some buzz to it, you know, to the show, because ultimately that's what it is, a show. And I think if you put in a minute, you know, a minute and a half in there of some of that in between the fights, it'll make it even better.
Yeah, I agree. That's awesome.
For
so
sure.
Last topic that I want to get to, and then we'll go ahead and wrap things up.
Yeah.
So speaking of all the events that go on in sport karate, and the next Pan American Internationals, you're going to be taking on a role as a co-promoter along with your father, right?
Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about the Pan American Internationals. I know this year you guys had to go virtual because of COVID-19 and everything. So
Yeah.
looking ahead to the next event, are you guys thinking of any specific dates yet? And what should everybody be on the lookout for? Where should they stay tuned to? Obviously, Black Belt Magazine will be posting updates as well.
Yeah.
But just give us some updates on what you're looking forward to about the next Pan American Internationals that I highly, highly recommend everybody watching that loves sport karate to attend.
Yeah, for sure. Basically we're just waiting for everything to be safe, to do this year we decided to go virtual, just just a pandemic, especially now the thing is about the coronavirus, it's been different and like it's different in different places. I know in some areas that it's not even, they have no cases at all, and like the karate schools are thriving and everything, so even in Miami, like my karate school is in an area where people are scared, but then my father's school is thriving. He has over 100 students already. He's almost at where he was. So I guess we got to kind of wait for it all to kind of get back to normal. But next year, hopefully things start getting better. We're thinking that we're hoping, that it will get better next year. And then NASCA, they're having meetings about starting the season safely too. So we're kind of like, I know that they're doing, they're having board meetings and they're planning it out now. And they're just, planning the tournaments in a safe way, right? Because that's the main thing. There's been tournaments out there now, and they're local, they're more regional tournaments, so it's easier in a way. 4 rings, or a few ballrooms, and you split it up. The Battle of Atlanta was great too. They had like 3 rings, and it was very good. So maybe if they follow blueprint like the Battle had, or even more, but it's different when it comes to a bigger tournament because there's like 25, 30 rings, 1,000 competitors, and then so we want to cater everybody and be safe. So, but the Pan Americans, we're planning on being back next year. That's how we're looking at it. We're NASCA and the Pan Ams. My dad, we're all kind of like planning for all that. Hopefully, the plan will be out soon, right? Because everybody's kind of waiting and hoping. But let's see what happens. We got this election to come by. I'm not getting into politics, but I think that after the elections, I'm hoping things will get better. That's what I'm hoping and praying that 2021 gets better for everybody.
Yeah,
for sure.
I think we can all share that sentiment that we just hope that things get better. And everybody that's interested in hearing the updates on when NASCA announces their new COVID-19 policies for the upcoming season, tournament change dates and tournament date announcements, things of that nature, that will all be covered right here on Black Belt Magazine. We'll be sharing the articles to Facebook, so go ahead and make sure that you subscribe to our notifications on Facebook, and it'll also be uploaded to our site as well. So make sure you've got our site bookmarked so that you're going there regularly to always get all the news and updates, not just from sport karate and sport martial arts, but from everything within the martial arts world, from entertainment to all the traditional styles and everything in between. That's what Black Belt Magazine is for, is to give you guys that news and to keep you guys informed and updated on all the happenings in martial arts, regardless of your style, because we are truly an unbiased media source for all elements of the martial arts. So we strongly encourage you guys to check out the site for all of those updates. Alex, thank you so much for your time. This has been awesome. I loved hearing your story. Everything that you're involved in to help make this sport better is something that I respect so greatly. I always tell people there's nothing that I respect more than somebody that is dedicating their life to making what they love bigger, right?
Yeah.
So if you show your passion towards taking that thing that you love, whether it's a sport or a hobby or an industry or whatever it may be, and when you find that thing that you're passionate about and you dedicate your life to making that bigger and sharing that with the world to make the world a better place, there's nothing that I respect more than that. So thank you so much for coming on today. Any closing thoughts?
Thank you, man. Yeah, thank you so much. And I love what you're doing. I just want to give one shout out, okay? Mm-hmm. I know that this is going to be broadcasted tomorrow, right? But today's my wife's birthday, Shayla. I love you. She taught me the power of love, okay? And that's where I got power from. I'm known for saying power, baby. And that's where I got the word from power, because of the power of love that she showed me, okay? So happy birthday, babe.
Oh, that's an awesome shout out. Make sure that you tell her happy birthday from me as well. That's awesome. I know you guys, it was really cool when you guys got engaged at the last Pan American Internationals, right? That was a really cool moment. So for our audience that knows and loves Alex Reyes, speaking of you in the third person, before we get off of here, can we get just one big power baby from you?
Make sure you tune in to Black Belt Magazine. Power, baby. Woo!
Love it. All right, Alex, thank you so much. And thank you to everybody that tuned in and enjoyed this podcast. If you like it, make sure, once again, you're subscribed to Black Belt Magazine on Facebook. The Jackson Rudolph podcast also has its own Facebook page. If you ever want to see new guests or get updates about what guests are going to be coming on the show or recommend new topics to talk about, head on over to that page. Be sure to drop that in the comments. All of the updates about the podcast go to the Jackson Rudolph podcast on Facebook. And then we stream every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time on the Black Belt Magazine page. So make sure you don't miss out on upcoming episodes as well. I am your host, Jackson Rudolph. Black Belt Magazine is awesome. Thank you for giving us this platform. This has been episode 43 of the Jackson Rudolph podcast, and I'll see you next time.